The antiseptic smell hit me first, sharp, chemical, burning the inside of my nose. Then came the beeping, steady, mechanical, heartless. I tried to open my eyes, but my eyelids felt like they'd been glued shut. Every breath scraped my throat raw. The car, the crash, the guardrail spinning toward us. I remembered the impact. Metal crunching, glass exploding, my head slamming against something hard, then darkness. But now I could hear voices. Close, too close. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from, and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching. How long until we know? That was Owen, my son. His voice tight, controlled. The doctor said 24 to 48 hours. Sienna, my daughter-in-law. She sounded calm. Too calm for someone whose mother-in-law just nearly died. I tried to move my fingers. Nothing. Tried to open my mouth. Nothing. Panic clawed at my chest, but my body wouldn't respond. Was I paralyzed? Brain damaged? If she doesn't survive, the life insurance will get us everything. The words came from Owen. Quiet, matter of fact. Like he was discussing the weather. My heart monitor beeped faster. I heard it. They must have heard it too. Finally, Sienna whispered. I could hear the smile in her voice. No more begging, no more playing nice. The room tilted. Not physically, I couldn't feel my body, but everything inside me lurched sideways. My son, my only child. The boy I'd raised alone after his father died. The man I'd given everything to. Keep your voice down, Owen hissed. The nurse could come back. Relax. She's unconscious. Even if she wakes up, she probably won't remember anything from today. Footsteps, getting closer to my bed. The temperature in the room felt like it dropped 10 degrees. I focused every ounce of energy on staying still, on keeping my breathing even despite the screaming in my head. Ma'am? A new voice. Male, professional. I'm checking your mother's pulse. Is she going to be okay? Owen's voice cracked perfectly, Oscar-worthy. Fingers pressed against my wrist. Warm. Steady, the paramedic from the ambulance probably. I remembered his face hovering over me at the crash site. Remembered his calm instructions to stay still. Her vitals are stronger than expected. A pause. Ma'am, if you can hear me, try to squeeze my hand. I squeezed. Hard. She's responsive. The paramedic's voice sharpened. She's not unconscious. Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. Then Owen. That's wonderful. Mom, can you hear us? We're here. We love you. The paramedic's grip on my wrist tightened slightly. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Harder. She's not unconscious, and she can hear every word you're saying. The air left the room. I heard Sienna's sharp intake of breath. Owen's strangled, "What?" Every word. The paramedic, his badge said, Morris, I'd seen it in the ambulance, spoke slowly, deliberately. Mrs. Talbot has been conscious this entire time. She heard your conversation about life insurance. We didn't mean, Sienna stammered. Save it. Morris released my wrist gently, carefully, like I was made of glass. I'm calling hospital security and Detective Patterson. He handles these kinds of cases. My eyes fluttered open. The fluorescent lights burned. Everything was blurry, shapes and shadows in too bright white. I blinked until Owen's face came into focus. He looked gray, pale, terrified. Mom, he breathed. Mom, I can explain. Step back from the patient. Morris positioned himself between Owen and my bed. His hand rested on something at his belt. Pepper spray, maybe, or a radio. The door burst open. A woman in scrubs, nurse, late 20s, Latina. Her name tag read Rodriguez. Rushed in with 2 security guards behind her. Mr. Morris radioed about a situation, one guard said. I tried to speak. My throat was sandpaper. Water, I croaked. Rodriguez was at my side instantly, tilting a cup to my lips. The water was lukewarm, plastic tasting, but I'd never been more grateful for anything in my life. Take your time, Mrs. Talbot, she murmured. Her hand rested on my shoulder, steady, grounding. I looked past her at Owen, at Sienna standing frozen by the window, her phone clutched in her hand. How much? My voice came out stronger than I expected. How much life insurance? Owen's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Mom, please, you don't understand. 300,000, Sienna said flatly. She'd recovered faster than Owen, her face settling into hard lines. You took out the policy 2 years ago when you sold the bookstore. You made Owen the beneficiary. The bookstore. My mother's bookstore. 40 years of her life, then mine. I'd sold it to pay off Owen's gambling debts. $67,000 he'd lost at the casino in Kansas City. He'd sobbed in my kitchen, swore he'd get help, promised he'd pay me back. That was 3 years ago. I'd never seen a penny. I gave you everything. The words came out quiet, flat. I watched Owen flinch. The bookstore money, Bryce's college fund when you said the business was failing, the $12,000 for Sienna's rehab. That wasn't rehab, Sienna cut in. Her voice had an edge now, defensive. That was a wellness retreat. I needed it for my mental health. You needed it for Instagram photos. The words came from the doorway. We all turned. A teenage boy stood there, backpack slung over one shoulder, his face older than 16 had any right to be. Bryce, my grandson, Owen and Sienna's son, Grandma. He crossed the room in 3 strides, ignoring his parents completely. His hand found mine, squeezed carefully. I heard what happened. Are you okay? His eyes were wet. Actually wet. Real tears, not the performance his father had put on. Bryce, go wait outside, Owen said sharply. No. Bryce didn't even look at him. I'm staying with Grandma. This is a family matter. She is family. You two? Bryce's voice cracked. I don't know what you are anymore. Rodriguez stepped forward. I think everyone except Mrs. Talbot and her grandson need to leave. Now. We have a right to be here, Sienna protested. We're her family. You're under investigation, Morris said quietly. Detective Patterson is on his way. You'll want to call a lawyer. Owen's face crumpled. For a second, just a second, I saw my little boy again. 7 years old, crying because he'd fallen off his bike. But then his jaw tightened and the stranger was back. Let's go, he muttered to Sienna. They left without another word. The door clicked shut behind them and the room exhaled. I looked at Bryce, really looked at him. When had he gotten so tall? When had his face thinned out, losing the baby roundness? How long have you known? I asked quietly. He bit his lip. About them wanting you dead? I didn't. But about them using you? He glanced at the door. Grandma, they've been lying about everything. Dad doesn't have a failing business. He sold it 6 months ago. For $200,000. The room spun again. They bought a condo in Florida. They're planning to move after. He stopped. Swallowed hard. They posted pictures on Facebook. Private account. But I saw them. Dad was tagged at some beach bar with the caption, Early retirement. Here we come. $224,000. That's what I'd calculated once. Late at night, unable to sleep. 8 years of emergencies and investments and just this one last time, Mom. Gone. And they'd been planning their escape all along. Mrs. Talbot? Rodriguez touched my arm gently. How are you feeling? Any pain? Everything hurt. My ribs, my head, my chest. But the worst pain wasn't physical. I'm fine, I lied. Bryce squeezed my hand again. Grandma, I'm not going with them to Florida. I'll turn 18 in 2 years. I can stay here with you until then. I'll get a job, Shh, I squeezed back. We'll figure it out. But even as I said it, I was thinking, calculating, planning. They'd wanted me dead. My own son had stood over my hospital bed and discussed my life insurance like I was already a corpse. Well, I wasn't dead. Not even close. And now they'd given me something I hadn't had in years. Absolute clarity about who they really were. Morris had left the room but returned now with a man in a cheap suit, Detective Patterson presumably. He had tired eyes and gray stubble and the patient look of someone who'd seen every horrible thing humans could do to each other. Mrs. Talbot, he said quietly. I need to ask you some questions about the accident. I nodded slowly. The brakes failed. We were coming down the hill on Route 32, and Owen was driving. and I told him to slow down, but nothing happened when he pressed the pedal. Patterson pulled out a notebook. "You're sure the brakes failed?" "It wasn't just slick roads. I'm sure." Owen kept pumping the pedal. Nothing. We went straight through the guardrail. Were there any mechanical issues with the car before today? I thought back. Tried to remember. Owen borrowed my car last week. Said his was in the shop. When he brought it back, he said he'd gotten the oil changed for me. Patterson and Morris exchanged a look. "We'll need to examine the vehicle," Patterson said. "Mrs. Talbot, I want you to know what happened in this room today, what Mr. Morris overheard. We're taking it very seriously. They were going to kill me." The words came out steady, certain. "Weren't they?" Patterson didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was gentle. "Let's focus on getting you healthy first. Then we'll get to the truth." But I already knew the truth. I could see it in Bryce's frightened eyes, in the careful way Rodriguez kept checking my monitors, in the way Morris stood guard at the door like he expected Owen to come back. My son had tried to murder me. And somewhere in this hospital, he and Sienna were probably calling lawyers, crafting stories, preparing their defense. But they'd made one mistake. They'd underestimated me. 68 years old, broken ribs, possible concussion, betrayed by my own blood, and they thought I'd just die quietly. They were wrong. They kept me in the hospital for 3 days. Observation, they called it. Cracked ribs, mild concussion, severe bruising. Nothing life-threatening, but enough that insurance would cover the stay. Insurance. The word tasted like metal in my mouth now. Bryce slept in the chair beside my bed every night. Owen and Sienna didn't come back after that first day, but I knew they were out there, waiting, planning. Detective Patterson had questioned them separately. I heard that from Rodriguez, who'd become my unofficial guardian angel. "They lawyered up immediately," she told me on the second morning, adjusting my IV with practiced efficiency. The plastic tubing was cold against my arm, both of them. Same attorney, which Detective Patterson says is interesting. Why interesting? I shifted in the bed. Every movement sent sharp pains through my ribcage because innocent people usually don't coordinate their legal strategy within an hour of an accident. Rodriguez checked the monitor, her fingers quick and competent. "I've worked ER for 6 years, Mrs. Talbot. I've seen families fall apart over medical crises. But I've never seen anyone lawyer up that fast unless they had something to hide." The morning light coming through the window was thin, watery. March in Cedar Rapids meant gray skies and stubborn cold. I could see my breath sometimes when they opened the door to the hallway. "Has Detective Patterson said anything about the car?" I asked. "He wants to talk to you today. He's waiting until your friend arrives." "Friend?" As if on cue, the door swung open. A woman I hadn't seen in 8 months walked in carrying a thermos and a paper bag that smelled like real coffee and cinnamon rolls. Margot Klein, my former colleague from Lincoln Elementary. We'd taught side by side for 23 years before we both retired. "Diane?" Her voice cracked. She set everything down on the rolling table and pulled me into a careful hug. "Jesus Christ, when Bryce called me?" "I'm okay," I whispered into her shoulder. She smelled like vanilla perfume and the coconut shampoo she'd used for decades. Familiar. Safe. She pulled back, studying my face. Margot had sharp eyes behind her thick-framed glasses, the kind of eyes that caught every student passing notes, every parent lying about homework. "Bryce told me what happened, what they said." Her jaw tightened. "I never liked that boy of yours. Sorry, but I didn't. Always had a slippery quality to him." "You're not wrong." I took the coffee she offered. Real coffee, not the hospital swill. The first sip was heaven. Hot, strong, exactly how I liked it. "Did Bryce tell you everything? About Owen and Sienna planning to cash in your life insurance?" "Yes." "About them possibly sabotaging your brakes?" "Yes." She pulled a chair close, lowering her voice. "About the Florida condo and the $200,000 from his business sale?" "Yes." Bryce appeared in the doorway, looking guilty. "I had to tell someone, Grandma. Someone you trust. You did the right thing." I gestured him closer. Margot's basically been my best friend since 1997. If anyone can help us figure this out, she can. Margot reached into her enormous purse, the same leather bag she'd carried for years, held together with duct tape and determination, and pulled out a folder. I did some digging, nothing illegal, just public records and social media. She spread papers across my lap. Printouts from Facebook, Instagram, property records from Florida, business filings. Owen's company, Talbot Digital Solutions, was sold 6 months ago to a firm in Des Moines. Sale price, $197,000, according to the state business registry. She tapped one document. He filed the paperwork in November. I'd given him $15,000 in November. He'd said the business was struggling, that he needed to make payroll or he'd lose his employees. There are no employees, Margot continued, reading my face. It was a one-man operation, website design, consulting. He was the only name on the LLC. My coffee suddenly tasted bitter. The Florida condo was purchased in January. Cash sale. Another document. Address is in Fort Myers, 2-bedroom, 2-bath, 8th floor, ocean view. Purchase price, $230,000. They spent more than they got from the business sale, Bryce said quietly. Exactly. Margot pulled out more printouts, which brings us to these Instagram posts. Sienna's account, marked private but visible to Bryce since he was her son. Photos of a condo interior, sleek, modern, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking turquoise water. Captions like, "New chapter coming soon," and "Goodbye Iowa winters forever." The most recent post was from 2 weeks ago, Sienna in a white sundress, champagne glass raised, standing on a balcony. The caption read, "Celebrating early retirement with my love. Dreams do come true when you're patient. Blessed, new beginnings." Patient. She'd been patient all right. Patient while bleeding me dry. "There's more," Margot said, her voice dropping even lower. "I have a friend who works at Cedar Rapids State Bank." She couldn't give me specific information, but she could confirm that someone made inquiries about your accounts 3 weeks ago. Inquiries? Asking about balances, beneficiaries, access. Your son was listed as having power of attorney for medical decisions, but he was asking about financial access. The room felt colder. I never gave him financial power of attorney. I know. That's what raised red flags. My friend made notes in your file about the inquiry, just as a precaution. Detective Patterson chose that moment to knock and enter. He looked even more tired than before, his suit rumpled, coffee stain on his collar. "Mrs. Talbot, Ms. Klein." He nodded at Margot, then noticed the papers spread across my bed. "Doing my job for me?" "Just gathering information to help my friend," Margot said coolly. Patterson almost smiled. "I need to talk to Mrs. Talbot about the vehicle inspection. Can everyone else step outside for a few minutes?" Bryce and Margot left reluctantly. Rodriguez stayed, standing by the monitors like she'd been assigned to guard me. Maybe she had been. Patterson pulled out his notebook, flipped through several pages. "Mrs. Talbot, we examined your vehicle yesterday. The brake lines were cut." I'd expected it, known it really, but hearing it out loud still hit like a fist to the stomach. "Cut," I repeated. "Not worn through, not damaged in the accident. Cut, deliberately, cleanly. Someone who knew what they were doing used bolt cutters or heavy shears. The lines were severed maybe 70% through, enough that they'd hold for a few miles of normal driving, but they'd fail completely under sustained pressure, like coming down a steep hill. Route 32. Owen had insisted on taking Route 32, even though the highway was faster. He'd said something about wanting to show me the fall colors, which had made no sense in March. "Owen was driving," I said slowly. "He could have died too." "Could have, but he was wearing his seatbelt. You weren't." My blood went cold. "I was wearing my seatbelt. I always wear my seatbelt. I'm religious about it." Patterson's expression didn't change. "Your son told responding officers at the scene that you refused to buckle up, said you'd been acting confused all morning, that he was worried about your cognitive state." "That's a lie." My voice came out sharp, angry. "I buckled my seatbelt the second I got in the car. I remember checking it twice because the buckle was stiff. The buckle was tampered with, Patterson said quietly. The release mechanism was jammed with superglue. It would click into place, appear secured, but release with minimal pressure. During the accident, your belt came free. The fluorescent lights above hummed. Someone's IV pump beeped down the hall. The smell of disinfectant seemed stronger suddenly, making my eyes water. He tried to kill me. The words came out flat, factual. My son tried to kill me. We're building a case for attempted murder, but Mrs. Talbot, I need you to understand. This is complicated. Owen has an attorney claiming he's a victim too, that someone else must have tampered with the vehicle. He's saying he had no idea about the brakes, that he could have died, but he was wearing a working seatbelt, and I wasn't. Exactly. But proving he knew about the glue in your buckle? That's harder. His lawyer is already preparing an alternate theory, that you glued your own buckle because you were mentally unstable, that this is some kind of insurance scam you planned. That's insane. That's reasonable doubt. Patterson closed his notebook, which is why I need everything you have. Financial records, text messages, emails, witnesses who can testify about your relationship with Owen and Sienna. Anything that establishes motive. Rodriguez cleared her throat. Detective, Mrs. Talbot has had a traumatic few days. Maybe this can wait. It's fine. I cut her off. Let me call Margot back in. She's already been documenting everything. What followed was 2 hours of methodical evidence gathering. Margot's papers, my own bank records going back 8 years, which I requested from the bank via phone, Bryce's testimony about the Facebook posts, the overheard arguments, the casual cruelty he'd witnessed. Patterson took notes, made copies, bagged documents. When he finally left, the sun was setting, painting the room orange and gold. We have enough for attempted murder charges, he said at the door. I'm bringing them in for questioning tomorrow. Fair warning, they're going to post bail immediately. Owen's lawyer is aggressive. How much bail? Bryce asked. For attempted murder? Probably $250,000 each. Bryce paled. They can afford that. The condo, the business money. Let them spend it. Margot's voice was hard. Every dollar they waste on lawyers and bail is one less dollar they get to enjoy in Florida. After Patterson left, the three of us sat in silence. Rodriguez brought dinner trays. Rubbery chicken, instant mashed potatoes, Jell-O that tasted like colored water. I picked at it, not hungry. Grandma? Bryce's voice was small. What happens to me if Dad goes to prison? I reached for his hand. You stay with me. I'll fight for custody if I have to, but you're not going anywhere. They won't try to— He couldn't finish the sentence. Hurt you? No. You're not worth $300,000 to them. I am. The words came out harsher than I intended. Sorry, that was true, Margot finished. That was true. Diane, these people are predators. They've been circling you for years, waiting for the right moment. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Mom, please call me. We need to talk. This is all a misunderstanding. I love you. Owen. I showed it to Margot. She snorted. Don't respond. That's evidence. Screenshot it and send it to Patterson. I did. Then I blocked the number. Another text came through from Sienna's phone this time. You're making a mistake. Owen would never hurt you. Think about Bryce. Do you really want to put him through a trial? She's using Bryce as leverage, Margot said, reading over my shoulder. Classic manipulation. I blocked that number too. Then I closed my eyes and let myself feel everything I'd been holding back. Rage, grief, betrayal. My son, my only child, the baby I'd nursed through colic and chicken pox and teenage heartbreak, had glued my seatbelt buckle and cut my brake lines and planned my funeral. Mrs. Talbot? Rodriguez touched my shoulder gently. Your heart rate is elevated. You need to rest. I need to think. You can think tomorrow. Right now, you need to heal. But even as I let her give me something for the pain, even as sleep pulled me under, my mind was working, calculating, planning. Owen had made one critical mistake. He'd let me survive. They released me on the 4th day. Margot drove me home in her ancient Subaru that smelled like dog hair and peppermint. Bryce sat in the back with my discharge papers and 3 prescription bottles rattling in a pharmacy bag. My house looked smaller than I remembered. The gray ranch style I'd lived in for 32 years suddenly felt like a stranger's home. The driveway had a crack I'd never noticed. The mailbox tilted at an odd angle. "Someone's been here," Bryce said, his voice tight. He was right. The spare key I kept under the ceramic frog by the front door was sitting on top of the frog instead of beneath it. Not hidden, just placed there, obvious and careless. Margot grabbed my arm. "We should call Detective Patterson." "Wait." I limped up the 3 porch steps, each one sending pain through my ribs. The front door was locked, but when I turned my key, something felt wrong. The deadbolt was already open, only the handle lock engaged. Inside, the house smelled stale. Windows closed, heat turned down to 60. March cold had seeped into everything. I could see my breath, but that wasn't what made my stomach drop. My living room had been searched, not ransacked. Nothing broken or obviously stolen, but moved. The couch cushions were slightly askew. The photo albums on the bookshelf were out of order. The drawer in my writing desk stood open half an inch. "They were looking for something," Margot said quietly. I walked through the house like I was touring a crime scene. Kitchen, cabinet doors not quite closed. Bedroom, dresser drawers disturbed. My jewelry box opened. The cheap costume jewelry was still there, but the envelope I'd hidden underneath, the one with my original birth certificate, my marriage license, my mother's will, was gone. "Grandma, look." Bryce stood in the doorway of the spare bedroom I used as an office. My filing cabinet drawer hung open. Manila folders spilled across the floor. Financial records, tax returns going back 7 years, bank statements, investment account summaries. All the proof of every dollar I'd given Owen. Gone. I sank into my desk chair. The leather was cold, cracked in places. The afternoon light coming through the window was weak, gray, filtering through clouds that threatened snow. "They took everything," I whispered. Margot was already on her phone with Patterson. I heard her voice in the background, sharp and angry, but the words didn't register. I was staring at the empty filing cabinet, thinking about my mother, Eleanor Sawyer. She'd bought the bookstore in 1952 with money saved from 15 years of teaching, built it into the most beloved independent bookstore in Cedar Rapids. When she died 8 years ago at 93, she'd left it to me with one instruction written in her shaky handwriting on a note card. "Don't sell it unless you absolutely have to. It's your legacy, sweetheart." I'd sold it 3 years later. For Owen. For his gambling debts. For his promises to change. My mother would have been ashamed of me. The thought hit like a physical blow. I bent forward, forehead against the desk, and let myself cry for the first time since the accident. Ugly crying, the kind that shakes your whole body and makes your throat raw. Margot found me like that, knelt beside the chair, rubbed my back the way she'd done 20 years ago when my husband died. "It's not your fault," she murmured. "None of this is your fault." But it felt like it was. I'd enabled Owen, made excuses, ignored the red flags that had been waving since he was a teenager. "Mrs. Talbot?" Detective Patterson stood in the office doorway, another officer behind him. "We need to document everything that's been disturbed." The next 2 hours were a blur of photographs and statements. What was missing? When I'd last been home, who had access? The spare key, which I'd foolishly told Owen about years ago. "We'll dust for prints, but I'm guessing they wore gloves," Patterson said. "This was deliberate. They wanted your financial records, probably planning to claim you gave them money willingly, and without your documentation, it's harder to prove otherwise." "I have bank statements," I said. "Digital records. They can't erase those." "No, but they can claim those were gifts, that you were helping family. Without your paper trail of loans, IOUs, promises to repay, it becomes," he said, she said. I thought of the notebook I'd kept for 5 years. Every dollar recorded, every promise noted. Owen's signature on 3 different loan agreements. All of it in that filing cabinet. All of it gone. "There's something else," Patterson said carefully. "We have security footage from your bank. 3 weeks ago, Owen came in with a woman who wasn't Sienna. Older woman, late 60s. She was with him when he made inquiries about your accounts. He showed me a still image on his phone. Grainy, taken from above, but unmistakable. My sister Ruth." The room tilted. I grabbed the desk edge for support. "You know her," Patterson said. "Not a question." My sister, Ruth Campbell. She lives in Iowa City. My voice sounded hollow. We haven't spoken in 8 months. Not since last July. Last July, my 71st birthday. Ruth had come for dinner, brought a grocery store cake, stayed for an hour. As she was leaving, she'd asked to borrow $5,000. Some problem with her roof, she'd said. She'd pay me back within the month. I'd said no. For the first time in our relationship, I'd said no. I was exhausted from bailing out Owen. Exhausted from being an ATM for everyone in my family. I told her I couldn't afford it. She'd called me selfish, said I was hoarding money I didn't need. That family was supposed to help family. She'd left angry, tires squealing as she pulled out of my driveway. I hadn't heard from her since. She's involved in this, Margot said flatly. She's helping them. Patterson nodded slowly. I need to bring her in for questioning. Mrs. Talbot, is there any reason your sister would want to hurt you? I thought about our childhood. Ruth, 3 years older, always resentful that our mother favored me. The bookstore was supposed to go to both of us, but Mom had left it to me alone. Ruth got the house in Iowa City and $20,000. I got the business worth $300,000. Ruth had contested the will, hired a lawyer, dragged me through probate court for 18 months, finally dropped it when her lawyer told her she had no case, but she'd never forgiven me. She's always been jealous, I said quietly, of everything Mom gave me, of the bookstore, of my marriage, my son. When her husband left her 15 years ago, she blamed me, said I'd had it too easy, that I didn't understand real struggle. And when you refused to lend her money, she said I'd regret it. I thought she meant she'd cut me off. I didn't think I couldn't finish the sentence. Bryce had been silent through all of this, sitting on the floor against the wall, hugging his knees. Now he spoke up, his voice careful. Grandma, remember Thanksgiving? When Dad said he couldn't host because his house was being fumigated. I nodded. We'd gone to a restaurant instead. Expensive, uncomfortable, everyone stiff and formal. He lied. I drove past his house that day. There was no fumigation. But Aunt Ruth's car was in his driveway, and when I texted him about it, he said I was confused, that it must have been a different house. Patterson and I exchanged glances. When was this? November 23rd? I remember because it was weird. Why would Aunt Ruth be at Dad's house on Thanksgiving if we weren't all together? Patterson made notes. Mrs. Talbot, I need you to think carefully. Is there anything else your sister might have access to? Any other information she could use? My safe deposit box. The key was on my keyring, but Ruth knew which bank, which branch. Years ago, when Mom died, we'd sorted through her affairs together. Ruth had helped me set up the box for important documents. She knows about my safe deposit box, I said slowly. But she doesn't have a key. She can't access it. Has anyone been to your box recently? I tried to remember. Not since last summer. June, maybe. I added my updated will. Patterson's expression sharpened. Your will. Who's the beneficiary? Owen. Everything goes to Owen. Then to Bryce, if Owen dies first. And your sister knows this? Everyone knows this. It's not a secret. Mrs. Talbot, I need to ask you to come to the bank with me tomorrow. First thing. I want to check your box. Make sure nothing's been tampered with. That night, Margot insisted I stay at her house. You're not sleeping alone in that violated space, she said firmly. Bryce agreed. We packed bags, locked up, left lights on to make the house look occupied. Margot's house smelled like cinnamon and old books. She set me up in her guest room, the same room I'd stayed in when my husband died, when I couldn't face my empty house. The bed was soft, the quilts heavy. A nightlight glowed in the corner, shaped like a reading cat, but I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Ruth, about how I'd taught her to braid her hair when we were kids, how she'd held my hand at Mom's funeral, how she'd been the first person I'd called when Owen was born. We'd been close once, before jealousy poisoned everything, before money became more important than blood. Around midnight, Bryce knocked softly on my door. Grandma, you awake? Come in, sweetheart. He sat on the edge of the bed, looking small despite being nearly 6 feet tall. I heard Aunt Ruth on the phone with Dad once, back in December. I was at their house picking up some stuff I'd left there, and I heard her voice from the garage. She was saying something about the old lady won't live forever, and being patient pays off. My chest tightened. Did you tell anyone? No, I thought they were talking about someone else. Maybe one of Dad's clients or something. His voice cracked. I'm sorry, Grandma. I should have said something. I pulled him into a careful hug, mindful of my ribs. You're not responsible for their choices. None of this is your fault. But inside, I was calculating. Ruth had been planning this with Owen for months, maybe longer. The two of them, working together to isolate me, discredit me, bleed me dry, and finally kill me. My sister and my son, the two people who were supposed to love me most in the world. The bedroom door creaked open wider. Margot stood there with 3 mugs of chamomile tea on a tray. Couldn't sleep either. Figured we could all use something warm. We sat in that guest room until 3 in the morning, drinking tea that got cold, talking through every memory, every warning sign I'd missed. Margot took notes in her teacher's planning book. Dates, names, amounts. Building a case. Tomorrow we go to the bank, she said finally. We see what they've done to your box, and then we start fighting back. They're going to come after me harder, I said. If Ruth's involved, if they're working together, they're not going to just accept charges and go quietly. Good. Margot's eyes were hard behind her glasses. Let them come. This time, you're not alone. Bryce squeezed my hand. And this time, you're not their victim. You're their nightmare. He meant it as encouragement, but the words settled over me like a promise. They'd wanted me dead and gone, my money in their pockets, my voice silenced forever. Instead, I was alive, angry, and ready to make sure they regretted every single lie. The bank opened at 9. We were there at 8:45, standing in the parking lot as frost melted off car windshields. Detective Patterson arrived with another officer, a younger woman named Chen who carried a metal evidence kit. Whatever we find today, Patterson said, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. We document everything. Photos, video, witnesses. If they've tampered with anything in that box, I want an airtight case. The bank manager, a nervous man in his 50s named Howard, met us at the door. He kept glancing at Patterson's badge like it might burn him. Mrs. Talbot, I want you to know, we take the security of our safe deposit boxes extremely seriously, he said, fumbling with his keys. His hands shook slightly. There's no way anyone could have accessed yours without proper authorization. Let's find out, I said quietly. The vault was in the basement, down carpeted stairs that muffled our footsteps. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, humming like angry insects. The air smelled like metal and old paper and something else. Fear, maybe. Or just my imagination. Howard used his master key first, then handed me mine. The box slid out with a metallic scrape that made my teeth hurt. It was empty. Not completely empty. There was a single piece of paper inside, folded once. My hands trembled as I reached for it, but Patterson stopped me. Don't touch it yet. Chen, photographs first. Officer Chen documented everything. The empty box, the paper, the way my hands hovered over it, frozen. Then Patterson used gloved hands to unfold the note. It was my will, the original, but it had been altered. Someone had used white correction fluid to change the beneficiary. Where it had said Owen Michael Talbot, it now said Owen Michael Talbot and Ruth Ann Campbell in equal shares. Jesus Christ, Margot whispered behind me. Patterson's jaw tightened. When was the last time you physically saw this document, Mrs. Talbot? Last June. I came to check on it after my birthday. My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. Everything was here then. The will, my mother's jewelry, the deed to my house, bonds worth about $30,000. All gone, Chen said, photographing the altered will from multiple angles. Except this. They wanted you to find this. Why? Bryce asked. Why leave evidence? Because they were planning to have it discovered after Mrs. Talbot died, Patterson said grimly. A tragic accident. Grieving family searches her safe deposit box and finds her real will, the one that splits everything between her son and sister. By the time anyone questioned it, Mrs. Talbot would be dead and unable to dispute it. Howard looked like he might be sick, But we have protocols, access logs, security cameras. Show me, Patterson ordered. Upstairs, in Howard's office that smelled of coffee and stress sweat, we watched security footage from the past 3 months, fast-forwarding through countless customers until Howard paused on a date, February 18th, 3 weeks before the accident. Ruth entered the bank at 10:47 a.m., alone. She approached the safe deposit area, spoke to a teller I didn't recognize. Young girl, maybe 22, blonde ponytail. "That's Madison," Howard said. "She's only been with us for 6 months. She was let go 2 weeks ago." "Let go why?" Patterson asked sharply. "Irregularities in her handling of customer accounts. Small things. Putting through transactions without proper verification. We gave her a warning, but then we found she'd been accepting cash tips from customers for expedited service." On the screen, Madison led Ruth to the vault. They disappeared from camera view for 12 minutes. When Ruth emerged, she was carrying a large purse that looked heavier than when she'd entered. "Did Madison have access to master keys?" Patterson asked. Howard's face went gray. "Trainee keys. Yes. They're not supposed to use them without supervision, but she let Ruth Campbell into Mrs. Talbot's safe deposit box in exchange for money." Patterson's voice was ice. "I need Madison's employment records. Address, phone number, everything. Now." While Howard scrambled to print documents, I stared at the frozen image of my sister on the screen. She was smiling, actually smiling, like she'd just won something. "Grandma," Bryce said quietly, pulling out his phone. "There's something I need to show you. I should have shown you before, but I was scared." He opened an app I didn't recognize, voice recording software. "I've been recording them," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Mom and Dad, since January. I knew something was wrong. The way they talked when they thought I wasn't listening. The phone calls they'd take in the garage. So I downloaded this app and I left my phone recording in my backpack, in the kitchen, wherever they were." He pressed play. Static first, background noise, then Sienna's voice, sharp and impatient. "Can't wait forever, Owen. Your mom could live another 20 years. My sister did that ancestry DNA thing and found out their family has longevity genes or whatever. We need to move faster." Owen's response was muffled, but I caught. "Already talked to Ruth about it. She's on board. Says she'll split it 50-50 with us after." "After what?" Sienna's voice dripped with false innocence. "After Mom's gone." "Jesus, Sienna, don't make me say it out loud. You're too squeamish. Ruth isn't. She said she'd handle the mechanical stuff. All you have to do is drive carefully and make sure you're wearing your seatbelt." Silence. Then Owen. "What about Bryce? What about him? He'll be at school. He won't know anything until after. We'll play devastated parents. Everyone will feel sorry for us." The recording continued. 5 minutes of them planning my death like they were planning a vacation, discussing the brake lines, the seatbelt glue, the route down Route 32 that had steep hills and dangerous curves. Ruth had done the actual sabotage. Owen had just driven the car. When the recording ended, the office was silent except for the wheeze of Howard's breathing and the hum of the computer. "How many recordings do you have?" Patterson asked Bryce, his voice careful. 17. Some are just boring stuff, but 6 of them are like this. Planning. Talking about money. Ruth calling grandma names. Bryce's voice cracked. "I'm sorry I didn't tell anyone sooner. I was afraid they'd find out and—" "You did exactly right," Patterson said firmly. "You gathered evidence safely. That took courage." He looked at me. "Mrs. Talbot, with these recordings, we have premeditation, conspiracy. We have Ruth admitting to the sabotage. This is attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, theft. I can arrest all 3 of them today." "Do it," I said. The words came out hard, final. "Arrest them." Patterson made phone calls, coordinated with other officers. Within an hour, we were back in Margot's living room. It had become our unofficial command center, watching the news on her ancient TV. Breaking story this morning. 3 Cedar Rapids residents have been arrested in connection with an alleged murder-for-hire plot targeting a family member. Owen Talbot, his wife Sienna Talbot, and Owen's aunt Ruth Campbell were taken into custody this morning and charged with attempted murder and conspiracy. They showed Owen being led out of his house in handcuffs. He looked smaller on TV, ordinary, not like someone who'd tried to kill his own mother. Sienna screamed at the cameras, her face twisted with rage. "This is insane! We didn't do anything! She's lying! That old woman is lying!" Ruth said nothing, just stared straight ahead as they put her in the police car, her expression blank and cold. "Bail hearing is set for tomorrow," Patterson told us by phone. "The DA is arguing for no bail given the severity of the charges and flight risk. They have a condo in Florida, money to run. But their lawyer will push hard for bail." "How much?" Margot asked. $500,000 each, maybe more. After Patterson hung up, we sat in stunned silence. Bryce curled up next to me on the couch, his head on my shoulder like he used to do when he was small. "Is it really over?" he asked. "The arrests are done. The trial will take months." I stroked his hair, feeling how much he'd grown. "But yes, sweetheart, the worst is over." That night, Margot made spaghetti, her grandmother's recipe, the sauce simmering for hours until the whole house smelled like basil and garlic and safety. We ate at her kitchen table, the three of us, and for the first time in weeks, food actually tasted like food. "I called a locksmith," Margot said, twirling pasta on her fork. "He's changing all your locks tomorrow. And I called a security company. You're getting cameras, motion sensors, the works. I can't afford—" "Yes, you can. Your sister stole $30,000 in bonds, but you still have the house, your pension, your savings accounts they couldn't access. You're not destitute, Diane. You're just wounded. There's a difference." After dinner, Bryce showed me something else on his phone, his Instagram account. He'd made a post the day after the accident, a photo of me in the hospital, eyes closed, bruised but alive. The caption read, "My grandmother survived a murder attempt by my own father. She's the strongest person I know. If you have an elderly family member, check on them. Make sure they're safe. Make sure people who claim to love them actually do. Family abuse awareness. Senior safety. Survivor, not victim." It had 47,000 likes, thousands of comments. "It went viral," Bryce said quietly. "People are sharing their own stories about family members who stole from them, abused them, isolated them. You're not alone, Grandma. There are so many others." I read through the comments with tears in my eyes. Stories of elderly parents swindled by children, grandparents isolated and controlled, inheritances stolen, lives destroyed by greed disguised as love. "You started something," Margot said, reading over my shoulder. "People are talking about this. The news picked it up because of Bryce's post. You're giving other victims permission to speak up." I hadn't meant to become a symbol. I just wanted justice. But maybe this was justice too. Not just for me, but for everyone who'd suffered in silence. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Mrs. Talbot, this is Madison Reeves, the bank teller. Detective Patterson gave me your number. I need to talk to you. Ruth threatened my family. I'm so sorry for what I did. Please." I showed it to Margot. She frowned. Could be a trap. Or she could be another victim. I thought about it, then typed back. "Talk to Detective Patterson first. He'll arrange a safe meeting." Her response came immediately. "Thank you. I have more information. About their plans, about Ruth's other victims. I'll tell the detective everything." Other victims. Plural. How many people had Ruth hurt? How many families had she destroyed? "Tomorrow we find out," I said, setting my phone down. "Tomorrow we hear what Madison knows, and then we make sure Ruth and Owen and Sienna never hurt anyone again." Bryce squeezed my hand. "You're not scared anymore." He was right. I wasn't. The fear that had lived in my chest for weeks, the fear of being alone, of being betrayed, of being killed, had transformed into something harder, something colder. Determination. They'd tried to kill me for money. They'd failed. Now they'd lose everything. The bail hearing happened in a courtroom that smelled like floor polish and anxiety. I sat in the front row between Margot and Bryce, my ribs still aching under the compression wrap the doctor had given me. Every breath was a reminder of what they'd done. Owen wouldn't look at me. He stared at the defense table, his shoulders hunched, wearing an orange jumpsuit that made him look pale and sick. Sienna sat beside him, rigid and furious, whispering angrily to their lawyer, a sharp-faced woman in an expensive suit who kept checking her phone. Ruth sat alone at a separate table with a public defender, She looked smaller than I remembered, older. Her gray roots were showing, her lipstick uneven. When her eyes finally met mine across the courtroom, I saw something I didn't expect. Fear. "All rise," the bailiff announced. Judge Morrison was a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and reading glasses on a chain. She reviewed the case files with the careful attention of someone who'd seen too many families destroy themselves. "The state is charging all 3 defendants with attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, theft, and tampering with evidence," she read aloud. "The state is requesting remand without bail, given the severity of charges and evidence of flight risk." Owen's lawyer stood immediately. "Your Honor, my client has no prior criminal record. He's a lifelong Iowa resident with strong community ties. He's willing to surrender his passport and submit to electronic monitoring. The state's case is based largely on circumstantial evidence and recordings obtained without proper..." The recordings were obtained by a minor in his own home, documenting crimes being planned against his grandmother. The prosecutor cut in. She was younger than Owen's lawyer, but her voice carried weight. "We have 17 separate recordings over a 2-month period showing clear premeditation. We have forensic evidence of vehicle tampering. We have video evidence of Ruth Campbell burglarizing Mrs. Talbot's safe deposit box. These defendants planned and executed an attempted murder. They're dangerous." Judge Morrison looked at Owen. "Mr. Talbot, do you wish to make a statement?" Owen's lawyer whispered urgently in his ear, but he stood anyway. His hands were shaking. "Your Honor, His voice cracked. He cleared his throat. Tried again. "I need to tell the truth." "Owen, don't," his lawyer hissed. He ignored her. His eyes found mine finally, and what I saw there made my chest tighten. Anguish. Real, raw anguish. "My Aunt Ruth started talking to me about my mother's money 2 years ago," he said, his words tumbling out fast. "After I sold my business. She said Mom was wasting her potential, that she could be living better, that we deserved some of that money for taking care of her as she got older." "Mr. Talbot, I strongly advise you to stop talking," his lawyer said sharply. "I can't." He was crying now, tears streaming down his face. "I can't keep lying. Ruth said if I didn't help her, she'd hurt Bryce. She showed me pictures of him, at school, at his friend's house. She'd been following him. She said accidents happen to teenage boys all the time." The courtroom went silent. "She threatened my son," Owen continued, his voice breaking. "So I went along with it. The money requests from Mom. The lies about my business. Ruth said we'd just take what we needed and Mom would never know. But it kept escalating. Ruth wanted more. She wanted everything." Sienna was staring at him, her mouth open. "What are you doing?" she whispered furiously. "Ruth told me she'd make it look like an accident," Owen said, ignoring his wife. "She said she knew how to cut brake lines, how to make it seem natural. I didn't think she'd actually do it. I thought she was just talking, but then she called me 3 days before the crash and said it was done, that all I had to do was take Mom for a drive on Route 32. He looked at me directly now. "Mom, I drove that car knowing the brakes were cut. I wore my seatbelt knowing yours was sabotaged. I took you down that hill planning to survive while you didn't. I'm guilty. I did this. But Ruth was the one who planned everything. She said if I didn't go through with it, Bryce would have an accident too. She said she'd hurt him and make it look like suicide." "Your Honor," the prosecutor stood slowly. "The state requests a recess to discuss a potential cooperation agreement with Mr. Talbot." Judge Morrison nodded. 30-minute recess. Defendants remain in custody. They took Owen out through a side door. Sienna was screaming at her lawyer. Ruth sat motionless, her face blank. In the hallway outside, Bryce grabbed my arm. "Grandma, is he telling the truth? Did Aunt Ruth really threaten me?" "I don't know," I said honestly, "but we're going to find out. Detective Patterson found us near the water fountain. Mrs. Talbot, the prosecutor wants to talk to you." Owen's offering to testify against Ruth in exchange for a reduced sentence, but they need to know if you're willing to accept that. "What kind of reduced sentence?" "Attempted murder drops to attempted manslaughter. Probably 5 to 7 years instead of 25 to life." Margot made a noise of disgust. "He tried to kill you and he gets 7 years?" Ruth planned it, Patterson said quietly. Owen was the weapon, but Ruth was the hand pulling the trigger. And if Owen testifies, we can prove that Ruth has done this before. Before, I repeated. Madison Reeves, the bank teller, she's been talking. Ruth used her to access 4 other safe deposit boxes over the past 3 years. Elderly clients, all of them. We're investigating now, but it looks like Ruth has been running this scam for a while. Befriend elderly people, get access to their finances, drain them dry, and move on. You were just the biggest score because your family. The floor tilted. I grabbed Bryce's arm for support. How many people has she hurt? I asked. At least 4 we know of, maybe more. One of them, an 86-year-old woman named Helen Morrison. She died 6 months ago. Fall down the stairs. Everyone thought it was an accident. Patterson's expression was grim. We're exhuming her body. Oh my God, Margot whispered. We met with the prosecutor in a small conference room that smelled like stale coffee and desperation. Her name was Rebecca Chen, no relation to Officer Chen, she clarified. And she laid it out clearly. Owen gives us Ruth, full testimony, all communications, everything. In exchange, he pleads guilty to attempted manslaughter and conspiracy. 5 years minimum, eligible for parole after 3 if he cooperates fully. Sienna gets the same deal if she testifies about what she knew. And Ruth? I asked. Ruth gets attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, elder abuse, and we're adding charges related to the other victims. She's looking at life without parole if we can prove the Helen Morrison connection. What about my grandson? I looked at Rebecca directly. Owen says Ruth threatened Bryce. Is that true? Rebecca pulled out a folder. We found texts on Ruth's phone, messages to a burner number we traced to Owen, dozens of them over the past year. Here's a sample. She showed me printouts. My hands shook as I read them. Your boy is growing up so fast. Would be a shame if something happened to him. Teenage boys are so reckless. Car accidents, drownings, overdoses. Tragic, really. You know what you need to do, Owen. Unless you want to find out how well Bryce can swim. The dates went back 14 months. Long before the crash, Ruth had been threatening Bryce for over a year. Jesus Christ, I breathed. Owen was telling the truth, Rebecca said quietly. Ruth coerced him through threats against his son. That doesn't excuse what he did. He still made the choice to participate. But it's a mitigating factor. The judge will consider it at sentencing. I thought about Owen in that courtroom, crying, confessing. I thought about the little boy who used to bring me dandelions from the yard, the teenager who'd called me every Sunday from college, the man who'd held my hand at his father's funeral and promised to take care of me. That man had died somewhere along the way. Or maybe he'd just been buried under years of weakness and bad choices. But he was trying to claw his way back now, trying to save his son the only way he knew how. If I agree to this, I said slowly, Owen has to do more than just testify. He has to get help, real help, therapy, treatment for whatever made him so easy for Ruth to manipulate. And he stays away from Bryce until Bryce decides he's ready to see him. Rebecca nodded. We can make those conditions of his plea deal. And Sienna is fighting the charges. Says she didn't know anything about Ruth's threats. Claims she thought Owen's plans were just talk. She's not cooperating. Then she gets the full sentence, I said firmly. She celebrated my death. I heard her. She knew exactly what was happening. Issa, when we returned to the courtroom, Judge Morrison read Owen's new plea agreement into the record. He pleaded guilty, voice steady this time, and was remanded to county jail pending transfer to state prison. 5 years. He'd be 52 when he got out. Sienna's lawyer requested a separate trial. Denied. She'd be tried alongside Ruth. Though at this point they were pointing fingers at each other so viciously that their lawyers had to be separated. Ruth never spoke, never testified, just sat there with her dead eyes while the prosecutor laid out her crimes like bodies on a table. 4 elderly victims over 3 years. Theft totaling over $400,000. 1 probable murder. 1 attempted murder. The bail was denied for both Ruth and Sienna. They were led away in handcuffs, and I felt something in my chest finally release. Outside the courthouse, news cameras were waiting. Bryce's viral post had turned this into a national story. Reporters shouted questions. "Mrs. Talbot, how does it feel to get justice? Are you angry at your son? What would you say to other elderly people being abused by family?" Margot tried to shield me, but I stopped her. I walked up to the microphones, Bryce on one side and Margot on the other, and I spoke. "My sister tried to kill me for money. My son was coerced into helping her through threats against my grandson. I'm angry, I'm heartbroken, but I'm also lucky because I survived, and because I have people who love me, really love me, not my bank account." I looked directly at the cameras. If you're an elderly person being pressured by family for money, tell someone. If your loved ones only call when they need something, that's not love. That's abuse. And if you're young and watching your parents or grandparents being manipulated, speak up. Be like my grandson. Be brave. Document everything. Save them before it's too late. The reporters erupted with more questions, but Margot guided me away. We drove back to her house in silence, all of us processing what had happened. That night, I got a call from the jail. Owen wanted to speak to me. I almost said no, but Bryce was listening, watching my face, and I knew he needed to see that forgiveness. Even conditional, painful forgiveness was possible. "Make it quick," I told the operator. Owen's voice was hoarse. "Mom, I'm sorry. I know that's not enough. I know nothing I say will ever be enough, but I need you to know. I never stopped loving you. I was just so weak, so scared, and Ruth knew exactly how to use that. You could have come to me," I said. "Told me Ruth was threatening Bryce. We could have protected him together." I know, I didn't think you'd believe me. I'd lied so many times already." He was right about that. I wouldn't have believed him. "Take care of Bryce," Owen said. "Please, be the parent I should have been." "I will," I promised. "But Owen, when you get out, if you want any kind of relationship with him, with me, you have to be different. Actually different. Not just sorry. I will be. I swear. I'll spend every day of these 5 years becoming someone worthy of you both." I didn't know if I believed him, but I wanted to. God help me, I wanted to. After I hung up, Bryce hugged me carefully, mindful of my ribs. "Do you think he means it?" he whispered. "I think he wants to mean it," I said. "We'll see if he does." Ruth's trial lasted 3 weeks. I sat through every day of it, Bryce on one side, Margot on the other. The courtroom became a second home. The same hard wooden benches, the same flickering fluorescent lights, the same smell of old paper and broken families. The prosecution built their case like archaeologists uncovering bones. Layer by layer, victim by victim, they showed exactly what Ruth Campbell had done. Helen Morrison, 86 years old, befriended by Ruth at a church social. 6 months later, Helen's safe deposit box was empty, and she was dead at the bottom of her stairs. The exhumed body showed evidence of blunt force trauma inconsistent with a simple fall. Ruth had pushed her. Margaret Chen, 73. Met Ruth at a grief support group after Margaret's husband died. Ruth helped her organize her finances. $32,000 disappeared over 4 months. Margaret was still alive, testified in a wheelchair, her voice shaking as she identified Ruth. Thomas Brennan, 68, Ruth's neighbor in Iowa City. She'd borrowed his tools, brought him casseroles, earned his trust. His coin collection, worth $47,000, vanished from his garage safe. He'd thought he was getting senile, forgetting where he'd put things. The coins turned up in a pawn shop in Omaha, traced back to Ruth through fingerprints. Patricia Kowalski, 79, Ruth's former co-worker from 20 years ago. They'd reconnected on Facebook. Ruth visited often, helped with shopping, had keys to the house. Patricia's jewelry, her late husband's war medals, $17,000 in cash from a coffee can in the freezer. All gone. Patricia testified crying, saying she'd thought Ruth was her friend. 4 victims, plus me. 5 families destroyed by greed, disguised as kindness. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, guilty on all counts. Judge Morrison's sentencing was 2 weeks later. The courtroom was packed. Victims' families, reporters, advocates from elder abuse organizations who'd been following the case. Bryce's viral post had sparked a national conversation. I'd been interviewed by 3 different news magazines. Other families were coming forward with their own stories. Ruth stood to hear her sentence. She'd aged 10 years in the past months. Her hair was completely gray now, her face gaunt. She looked small in her orange jumpsuit, shackled at the wrists and ankles. Ruth Ann Campbell, Judge Morrison read, her voice cold and clear. You have been convicted of 1 count of second-degree murder in the death of Helen Morrison, 1 count of attempted murder of Diane Talbot, 4 counts of elder abuse, 8 counts of theft, 5 counts of fraud. The court finds your actions to be predatory, calculated, and without remorse. Ruth's face remained blank. No tears, no emotion, just emptiness. For the murder of Helen Morrison, you are sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For the attempted murder of Diane Talbot, 25 years to run consecutively. For the remaining charges, an additional 30 years, also consecutive. The math was simple. Ruth would die in prison. She'd never see daylight as a free woman again. They led her away. She looked at me once as she passed. No apology, no explanation. Just a cold, evaluating stare, like she was still calculating what I was worth to her. Nothing, I thought. I'm worth nothing to you now. Sienna's trial had been separate but simultaneous. Her defense was that she'd known nothing about Ruth's threats, that she'd believed Owen was acting alone, that she was a victim of his manipulation too. The jury didn't buy it. They'd heard the recordings of her celebrating my expected death, seen her social media posts about early retirement, watched her lawyer try to paint her as an innocent wife following her husband's lead, while the evidence showed her as an active, enthusiastic participant, guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, guilty of fraud, 7 years. She'd be 45 when she got out. They took her away screaming about appeals and injustice and how this was all my fault for being vindictive. The reporters loved it. After the sentencing, Margot drove us back to my house, my real house, not her guest room. I'd moved back in 3 weeks earlier, after the security system was installed. Cameras on every door, motion sensors in every room, locks that couldn't be picked or glued. The house felt different now, lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted from the walls themselves. I'm making dinner, Margot announced, heading to my kitchen like she owned it. Which, honestly, she kind of did now. She'd been staying with me and Bryce since the trial started. The guest room was hers. Her dog, an ancient golden retriever named Biscuit, had claimed the living room couch. Margot, you don't have to. I'm making dinner, she repeated firmly. Bryce, set the table. Diane, sit down and rest. You've been carrying this family on your back for long enough. Let us help. So I sat, watched Bryce pull out plates and silverware with the easy confidence of a kid who'd finally found stability. Watched Margot chop vegetables with the same precise movements she'd used to grade papers for 23 years. My phone buzzed, a text from Rebecca Chen, the prosecutor. The restitution hearing is scheduled for next month. Ruth's assets are being liquidated. You'll receive compensation for the stolen bonds and jewelry, probably around $35,000 after legal fees. Not enough to replace what I'd lost, but enough to matter. Another text came through, this one from a number I didn't recognize. I almost deleted it until I saw the name at the bottom. Mrs. Talbot, this is Madison Reeves. I just wanted you to know I testified against Ruth today at her civil forfeiture hearing. They're taking her house, her car, everything. The money will go to her victims. I'm so sorry for what I did. I hope someday you can forgive me. I'm getting help now. Real help. Thank you for giving me a second chance. I stared at the message for a long moment. Madison had been a victim too, in her way. Young, broke, manipulated by Ruth's promises of easy money. She'd made terrible choices, but she'd also come forward, testified, helped build the case. I forgive you, I typed back. Keep getting help. Be better. Her response was immediate. I will. Thank you. Forgiveness was strange. It didn't erase the damage, didn't make the betrayal hurt less. But it felt like setting down a heavy bag I'd been carrying. Not for Madison's sake, for mine. Dinner was spaghetti again. Margot's comfort food of choice. We ate at the kitchen table, the three of us, and talked about anything except trials and murders and betrayals. Bryce told us about his college applications. He wanted to study psychology, help people like us who'd been manipulated and hurt. "You're going to be amazing at it," I told him honestly. "You already saved my life once. You'll save a lot more." His eyes got wet. "Grandma, I was so scared. When I realized what they were planning, I didn't know what to do. I thought if I told anyone, they'd hurt you faster. You did exactly right. You documented everything and kept yourself safe. That's all I could have asked for." After dinner, Margot pulled out a bottle of wine she'd been saving. "To surviving," she said, pouring 3 glasses, a small one for Bryce, who was technically still underage but who'd earned it. "To surviving," we echoed. The doorbell rang at 8. I almost didn't answer it. Too many reporters, too many curiosity seekers driving by to see the house where it had all happened. But when I checked the security camera feed, I recognized the visitor. Dr. Phelps, the doctor from the hospital who'd been the first to question my coma. I opened the door. He stood there holding a casserole dish, looking embarrassed. "Mrs. Talbot, I hope I'm not intruding. I wanted to check on you. Make sure you are healing properly." "I'm fine," I said, but I stepped back to let him in. "Really fine, thanks to you." "If you hadn't caught that Ruth was trying to bribe you, I almost didn't catch it," he admitted. "She was subtle, offering to make a donation to my research fund if I'd sign off on some paperwork declaring you mentally incompetent." I thought it was odd, started asking questions. He handed me the casserole. "Chicken pot pie. My grandmother's recipe. Seemed appropriate." We invited him to stay for coffee. He and Margot hit it off immediately. Both medical professionals, both with dry senses of humor, both clearly lonely in that way that comes from devoting your life to helping others. I watched them talk and laugh and saw something I hadn't expected. A possibility. Not for me. I was done with romance, done with trusting people that way. But for Margot, who'd been divorced for 15 years and insisted she was happy alone, maybe she didn't have to be alone. Maybe none of us did. 3 months later, I stood in front of a crowd at the Cedar Rapids Community Center. 200 people had shown up for the elder abuse awareness event that local advocates had organized around my story. I'd never been good at public speaking, spent 30 years teaching first graders, not giving speeches. But the organizer had asked, and Bryce had encouraged me, and Margot had helped me write note cards. So I stood there, under bright lights, microphone in hand, and told my story. Not all of it, not the most painful parts, but enough. Enough to let other people know they weren't alone. That family betrayal was real, common, devastating. That asking for help wasn't weakness. That surviving made you strong, not broken. "I'm 68 years old," I said to the silent crowd. "My sister tried to kill me. My son helped her because he was being threatened. My daughter-in-law celebrated it. For months, I thought I was alone. I thought I'd failed somehow, that I'd been a bad mother, a bad sister, to deserve this." I paused, looked at Bryce in the front row. He smiled at me, encouraging, but I didn't deserve it. None of us do. If someone you love only loves your money, that's not love. If they pressure you, manipulate you, threaten you, that's abuse. And you deserve better. We all deserve better. The applause was thunderous. People stood. Some were crying. After my speech, 17 people came up to tell me their own stories. 3 gave me contact information for lawyers. 5 said they were finally going to report their situations to the police. One woman, maybe 90 years old, held my hands and whispered, "Thank you for being brave enough to fight back. You gave me permission to fight back too." That night, lying in my own bed in my own house with the new locks and cameras keeping me safe, I thought about Owen. He'd been in prison for 4 months now. He wrote every week, long letters talking about therapy, about the books he was reading, about how he was learning to be honest with himself. I hadn't written back yet. Wasn't sure if I would. But I'd kept the letters, all of them. In a box in my closet next to the box of Bryce's baby pictures and my mother's recipe cards. Maybe someday I'd read them. Maybe someday I'd even respond. Maybe when he got out in a few years, we'd find a way to rebuild something, not what we had before, that was gone, dead, buried, but something new, something honest. Or maybe I wouldn't. Maybe some bridges should stay burned. The choice was mine now. That's what freedom meant. Not forgetting what happened. Not pretending it didn't hurt. But choosing how to move forward on my own terms. I still owned my house. Still had my pension and my savings. Still had Bryce, who was thriving in his senior year, already accepted to 3 universities. Still had Margot, who'd become more than a friend. She was family now, the real kind. Ruth would die in prison. Sienna would serve her time and emerge to nothing. No money, no reputation, no easy retirement. Owen would have his chance at redemption if he took it seriously. And me? I was free. Actually free. Maybe for the first time in my adult life. Free from obligation disguised as love. Free from manipulation disguised as family. Free from guilt that was never mine to carry. I'd survived the accident, survived the betrayal, survived the trial. Now I was going to do more than survive. I was going to live. On my terms. With people who loved me for me, not for what I could give them. That was the real victory. Not the convictions or the sentences or the restitution. The victory was reclaiming my own life. And that, I thought as I turned off the light, was worth more than any amount of money my sister and son could have stolen. Say.